Honorable Mr. Justice V. Ramasubramanian, sir, Judge of the Honorable Supreme Court of India, Justice C. Kodandaram, sir, Judge of the High Court of Telangana, Justice Soumyajulu, sir, Judge High Court of Andhra Pradesh, Justice K.R. Sriram, sir, Judge High Court of Bombay, Justice V. Ramkumar, sir, Justice K. Ramashan, sir, Justice Nagamuthu, Senior Advocate, Advocate Sriram, Advocate General of Andhra Pradesh, friends, and all of you wonderful participants, welcome to the 200th session of Legal Empowerment Through Interaction lecture series. It is indeed a momentous occasion for the Littles family because we started, it's a humble beginning as a purely inter and intra-office discussion and debate platform invented during the lockdown session. Since its first session on 23/4/2020, it has grown into a national platform of high-quality intellectual debate and deliberation on legal topics of current relevance. It has also created a legal database freely available to all on YouTube with more than 6,000 subscribers. I would, on this occasion, like to thank one of my associates, Advocate Afshar Shadi, for all the technical assistance he has been providing for having this platform up and providing all the recordings online. Now, all this was made possible only because of the active interest and involvement of the participants from all over the country. And in fact, we have forged a family bond. Littles for us is now an extended family of meeting in the weekends. And the eminent faculty, many of whom are present today, those who have addressed in the different Little sessions earlier, who shared their valuable time and wisdom with us. We salute all those speakers. we are blessed with the presence, I would say the regular presence of Justice V. Ramkumar sir, who is in fact the backbone of Littles, which has given us the courage to go ahead. And Justice K. Ramachandran sir also, who has been regularly present in almost all the webinars. We started these lectures and interactive sessions every day for the first 100 sessions by eminent faculties on diverse topics of law, with Honorable Mr. Justice Nageshwar Rao sir, Judge of the Supreme Court, addressing us on the 100th session on 1st August 2020. We commenced this session 2 or season 2 of Littles on 6/8/2020 and confining the sessions to the weekends alone. Today, we are having our 200th session, the concluding session of season 2 of Littles by His Lordship, Honorable Mr. Justice V. Ramasubramanian sir, on the topic social media, the balance between free speech and its restrictions. A very relevant topic, as dependency on internet and net-enabled services are on the increase. Yesterday, I just read in Live Law and Bar and Bench, the Honorable Supreme Court has warned state governments and police against clamping down on the spread of information or calls for help through the social media from citizens affected by COVID-19, and that any such clampdown of information would be treated as contempt of court. We will commence season 3 of Littles next week on 8th March 2021. We believe, sir, with such proactive participation and interaction, we hope to enrich and empower ourselves and all the stakeholders with legal knowledge and acumen, facilitating all to be better equipped to discharge our duties and obligations confidently, thus be of better service to the justice dispensation missionary. So on this 200th session, let us take a pledge that we'll forge ahead, inspired by the glorious past, enthused by the contemporary seal, and enthralled by the clarion of the future. May we welcome Honorable Mr. Justice Kodaram sir for the introductory remarks. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Shyam. I consider it to be my privilege today. Before I slowly read out what I jotted down with regard to the senior Justice Mr. Subramaniam. Well, there is a Telugu adage which says that Jagamerigina Brahmadiki Jengemela. I'm sure that my brother Ram Subramaniam will understand that. The little English translation is, he's a well-known Brahmin and he doesn't require the cross thread, because that's an indication, that's how I put it. But it's at the same time, you have given me this opportunity, I wouldn't like to let it go. So, as I said, I'll just read out a few of the things which I have noted down, because it's very difficult to remember all the achievements of Justice Ram Subramaniam. And that too, a person like me who is little careless and careless, so it's very difficult. Justice Sri Ram Subramanian is a sitting judge of the Supreme Court of India. He is an embodiment of excellent legal acumen, coupled with intelligent wit, with a great depth in complexities of law and society at large. He is widely respected for his knowledge in the ethics and many other subjects, and for his brilliant articulation. Besides this, he has a great interest in culture, music, and ardent lover of flora and fauna. I have personal acquaintance with him. I have seen him from the closer, the quarters. He was born in June 1958 at Mannargudi in the erstwhile Thanjavur district. He completed his schooling in Hindu High School, Triplicane. After graduating in chemistry from the Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda College, he studied law and got enrolled as an advocate in the Bar Council of Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry on 16 February 1983. He was a junior in the Office of Senior Advocates A. Sarvabhauman and P.R. Mani. He set up his independent practice in 1987. In 2006, he was elevated as a judge of the Madras High Court. When he was the judge of the Madras High Court, the Madurai edition of the Hindu carried an article on October 22, 2010 about his style of writing judgments under the caption, "The Art of Writing Judgments." It's a very interesting reading for everyone to read. Again, the same newspaper carried another report under the caption, "All in a Lighter Vein." On April 11, 2014, hailing him as one who uses humor as a tool to ease tension in the court hall. A prolific speaker in both Tamil and English, several of his speeches are available on YouTube. For 50 weeks from October 2012 to October 2013, Justice Ramasubramanian was running a column in the Tamil newspaper Dinamani under the caption Solvetai, creating new words in the language, on the lines on which Barbara Walraff successfully ran a column for the Atlantic Times under the caption Word Quote and Word Fugitives. All these 50 articles have been compiled and it has come out in the form of a book. He also wrote a series of articles for the same Tamil newspaper for 27 weeks under the caption Beyond Science on the mysteries of the world, which science is yet to explore. He has also authored a book in Tamil on the principles of law and justice. This was titled as Ramayana. When he was transferred from Madras High Court on his own request to Hyderabad, the Times of India Chennai edition hailed him as a jet known for his wit, wisdom, and scholarly analysis of complex issues of law. The Hindu wrote a scholarly jet's bit adieu. He has rendered landmark rulings during his tenure at Madras High Court. One of the judgment is with regard to trademark dispute raised by a web portal. He had dwelled deep into the internet years ever since its beginning of 1969, with just 4 computers located at University of California. He traced entire history. Then Trademarks Act of 1999 speaks of honest practices in business at 2 places, but does not indicate anywhere as to what constitutes honest practice. It may perhaps be the support. It may perhaps be due to the fact that persons who follow honest practices in everyday life do not need a definition from the statute book, while for others no amount of definition would be of any use. It's really a punching statement. He went on to say, honesty is actually an animus of mind. It can never be discovered either by words spoken by a person or by acts of omission and commission committed by him. Therefore, one can only make inferences from the circumstances. This is the September 20th, 2019 Hindu. Well, you also know that Justice Ramasubramanian has a lot of interest in ethics and a very religious and pious man. His interest in ethics goes like this. Does modern jurisprudence bear any resemblance to ancient Indian legal philosophy? To what extent do we find such congruence? A talk by Justice V. Ramasubramanian, Honorable Judge of the Supreme Court of India, juxtaposed the current Eurocentric legal theory with that of ancient India. The webinar Law and Justice from Our Ethics was organized by one of the things which is available on YouTube. Everyone should take time to watch that. He is very good at narrating stories from Smritis, Vedas, Puranas. He discusses, he makes the quote so lively. Even with regard to the last occasion when I took him to Ramakrishna Mutt, apart from the Swamiji with whom he had a close association from Chennai days, the audience were thrilled. He speaks about, while observing with regard to Smrutis and Smritis are similar in character to international conventions, acts, orders, and judicial pronouncements. Puranas and Itihas are like legal cases that are complicated by real life situations. A large number of literature is available with respect to his speeches in the web portals, which makes very interesting reading. The number runs into so many thousands of pages. It's very difficult for me to paraphrase and summarize at this point of time. But except to just some of the instances which I can mention is mentioning of some of the instances where substantial laws were laid down during the times of Ramayana. He explained Bharata's list of moral injunctions. Bharata's list had a laws related to ethical business, family matters, taxation, pollution of the environment, breach of trust, addiction, and more. Similarly, contract law principles can be seen in the epic of Ramayana. He goes on to add, when Dasaratha decides to crown his eldest son Rama as his successor in the royal court of Ayodhya, his wife Kaikeyi reminds him of his promise made to her years ago. In order to bind him to his earlier promise, despite his decision in the royal court that contradicts it, Kaikeyi remarks, it will be in vain to build a dam when the water has already run down. This principle can be seen in most of our commercial laws today. That's how he quoted, providing example of how a bank treats treaties to payees who present checks. The bank pays to the payee who presents the check first, he added. A large number of instances are there. I wouldn't like to read out much, but I can say with my personal experience with him for the short period of 2-3 years, and also the large amount of literature available about him in the web as well as in print media. A person of extraordinary caliber, a person of extraordinary in-depth knowledge, and with the courage and conviction, and most important thing is the character, honesty and character. In fact, I'm happy to say that he's a great devotee of Bhagwan Satsai Baba, and I have inclined, and he also keeps teasing me for not able to stick on to my words of many a times, and I take it with pinch of salt. And remarkably, we have one thing in common. In most of the meetings, we both are very informally dressed. We don't stick on to the formalities of tie, coat, and all. I'm rather surprised today that Brother Ram Subramaniam is in full form. Maybe the dignity of office requires him to be there at this point of time. Otherwise, normally all Satyasai Baba's devotees, they are with the white shirt and a white pajama or white pant. That's how it goes. And he grew up with the Balvikas. He grew up with the Balvikas principles. And that is reflected in every word he utters, every act which he does. It's what they call it as the sweetness or the proof of pudding is in pudding, eating it. The one punchline with which I would close about him is with regard to what he said while leaving Madras High Court in the farewell. It's a very momentous time because, as I mentioned earlier, he got transferred himself at his request. And naturally, there was an element of confrontation to be avoided there. But the way he put it with the courage, I quote, to my friends, supporters and well-wishers, I say this, that my thoughts are always with you. To my detractors, who constitute a microscopic minority and who have now been tamed, I say this, that I'm not running away from the battlefield, but just positioning myself. Is a very, each word is a punch word. Positioning myself at a distance carefully worked out so that long-range missiles can be fired and the rebel camps completely destroyed. So that tells about the person. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to recollect and also to do little more research with regard to the senior.
Thank you, Justice Kondaram, sir. And before
I would like to mention about the judgments law, because they're all there. Every day we keep reading judgments, and I would like to multiply with them. Though my brother Prem also had given me a list, and then I also found a number of judgments. Which judgment I should say that this is good, this is bad. So there's no point in mentioning because everything is good. Everything is, there is something in it. I had a very small stint, a very short period I sat with him in 1 or 2 but the ease with which he delivers, the ease with which he deals with the bar and handles the people, and even most of the situation where you would like to go and beat up the other person, he handles it so well. It's an art. It's very difficult for all others like me to get. Anyway, as my brother has said, I'll be a free man in 3 months' time.
Thank you, Justice Kodaram sir. Before we request the Speaker of the Day, Justice Ramasubramanian sir, to address us, maybe recognize the presence of Justice Roshan Dalvi, Justice Ramana MV, and Justice Doraikannu Karunakaran, former Judge of the Supreme Court of Seychelles. Welcome all of you. Sir, maybe request you to address us on the topic, social media.
Honorable judges, past and present, who have been kind enough to log in, learned senior advocates, dear members of the legal fraternity, I think Justice Kodanram has made my task very tough. We used to say in Tamil that if a person who introduces you to an audience speaks very high of you, the expectations go higher and higher. The benchmark set will be very high for the speaker to cross. I don't know why he took on me with so much about me. I thank Justice Kodanram for all these kind words. Very good evening to all of you. Friends, the world in which we live today can be encapsulated in the following words. Today, our phones are cordless. Our communications are wireless. Our cooking is fireless. Our sweets are sugarless. Our education is valueless. Our approach to many things is careless. Our interaction with others through social media is mostly faceless. About the new variant of corona, the scientists are clueless. Some of our hospitals are bedless and oxygenless. In such cases, the wait for the patients is limitless. The families of these patients are helpless and their agony endless. The situation in a few places is hopeless. Even in our crematoriums and burial grounds, they are now spaceless. Therefore, some of our judges have now become restless, and the oral observations they make sometimes are mindless. And much of the information available in the net is also useless. This is how I would sum up the world in which we live today. It is in this context that I chose to speak on the topic social media. Though it is actually christened as social media, the way misinformation is spread, fake news is disseminated, fake profiles are created, and the hatred incited through social media, a time may come when one may wonder whether it is social media or anti-social media. As WHO Director General Tedros pointed out, today we are not just fighting a pandemic, we are fighting an infodemic because of social media. On March 15, 2019, innocent Muslims were killed and an equal number wounded in shootings at 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. If the incident itself was shocking, the way the world came to know of the attack was horrendous. In the words of Kevin Rose, as written in New York Times, I quote, "The incident felt like a first, an internet native mass shooting conceived and produced entirely within the irony-soaked discourse of modern extremism. The attack was teased on Twitter, announced on the online message board 8chan, and broadcast live on Facebook. The footage was then replayed endlessly on YouTube, Twitter, and Reddit as the platforms scrambled to take down the clips nearly as fast as new copies popped up to replace them. Unquote. While reporting the killings, CNN Business pointed out, I quote, social media has increasingly been co-opted by terrorists in recent years. In 2013, Al-Shabaab militants live tweeted the Westgate shopping mall attack in Nairobi, Kenya, by posting updates as the militants opened fire on shoppers. They took control of the narrative away from the media and bystanders. Terrorism is political violence, so the terrorists have always needed to find publicity to effect political change, says Adam Hadley, director of the tech giant Tech Against Terrorism, a group that works on behalf of the United Nations to support the global tech industry in tackling terrorist exploitation of their technologies. While what happened in Christchurch is a one-off and a direct form of terrorist attack, what is happening during elections in democracies is a cause for serious concern. Pew Research Center and Elon University's Imagining the Internet Center conducted a survey with technology experts in 2019 to assess the potential future effects of people's use of technology on democracy. Though the results of the survey contained only opinions of individuals, those opinions were actually molded by what had happened in a few democracies. In the paper published after the survey by Pew Research Center on February 21st, 2020, they quoted an internet pioneer who chose to remain anonymous and who is based in North America. What he said is actually disturbing, and it goes as follows, I quote, I am deeply concerned that democracy is under siege through abuse of online services and some seriously gullible citizens who have trouble distinguishing fact from fiction or who are wrapped up in conspiracy theories or who are unable or unwilling to exercise critical thinking. We are seeing erosion of trust in our institutions, fed in part by disinformation and misinformation campaigns designed to achieve that objective and to stir dissent. We are seeing social networking systems that provoke feedback loops that lead to extremism. Metrics such as likes or views or followers are maximized through expression of extreme content. Trolls use media that invite commentary to pump poison into discussion. Privacy is abused to commit crimes and other harmful acts. At the same time, privacy is extremely hard to come by given the ease with which information can be spread and found on the net. Nation states and organized crime are actively exploiting weaknesses in online environments. Ironically, enormous amounts of useful information are also found and used to good effect all the time, in spite of the ills listed. The challenge we face is to find ways to preserve all the useful aspects of the internet while protecting against its abuse. If we fail, the internet will potentially devolve into a fragmented system offering only a fraction of its promise. In the meantime, democracy will suffer. This is what was recorded in the research conducted by Pew Research Center. The statement which I just read about was not based just upon perception. There is a very interesting book titled Tools and Weapons, The Promise and the Peril of Digital Age. It is authored by Mr. Brad Smith, Microsoft President, and Ms. Carol Ann Brown, Senior Director of Communications at Microsoft. In that book, there is a chapter captioned Social Media, the Freedom That Drives Us Apart. This chapter contains details about the investigation undertaken by the agencies in the United States after the 2016 presidential elections. According to the book, a team from Oxford University and the American analytics firm Graphica analyzed Supernode data that Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube provided to the Senate Intelligence Committee of the United States. The team documented as to how another country's intelligence agency launched an attack on United States by using computational propaganda to misinform and polarize voters. According to the report, the book says that between 2015 and 2017, more than 30 million users shared Facebook and Instagram posts of the intelligence agency of another country with their family and friends, liking, reacting to, and commenting on them along the way. It is claimed by the author of the book, Brad Smith, that by manipulating American-made technology, the other countrymen were able to reach into and stir the United States political pot. The book claims that this foreign influence spilled over into the real physical world when a synchronized protest and counter-protest was organized in Houston in 2016, making neighbors shout at neighbors, unknowingly egged on by people elsewhere. Therefore, the author of the book, Tools and Weapons, Mr. Brad Smith says, I quote, "The United States as a nation has been comfortable using technology to seed and advance democracy. But now technology is being used to spread disinformation and disrupt democracy. Until recently, communication technologies seemed to favor democracy and put authoritarianism on the defense. Now, we must ask whether the internet has created an asymmetric technology risk for democracies that authoritarian governments can counteract more readily than the Republican form of government. The answer is probably yes." This is what Brad Smith says. In fact, after the 2016 US presidential elections, Ms. Kathleen Hall Jamieson, a professor of communications at the University of Pennsylvania, wrote a book titled Cyber War, arguing as to how another country's hackers and trolls helped elect a president in her own country and what people don't know and can't know. Her study revolved around the electronic warfare waged by trolls and hackers, whom she describes as discourse saboteurs, and the kind of influence that these people can have on voters. Democracies around the world, according to her, have begun to realize that subverting an election does not require tampering with voting machines. Extensive studies of past campaigns, Jamieson said, have demonstrated that you can affect people who then change their decision, and that alters the outcome of an election. Having seen how social media can be used as a weapon for nefarious purposes, including disruption of democracies, let us now see how it can be used as a tool for social justice and equality before law also. All of you may be aware of the fact that on February 26, 2012, a 17-year-old African-American school student by name Trayvon Martin was shot dead by Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch coordinator of a gated community. Zimmerman was initially taken by police for questioning, but released later, accepting his claim of having acted in self-defense and holding that he cannot be arrested in view of Florida's Stand Your Ground statute. Initially, the story of Martin's killing was covered only by the local media outlets. But Martin's family, the victim's family, they hired the services of a publicist called Ryan Jolison. Thereafter, Reuters, CBS News, Huffington Post, Young Turks, etc., started covering the case. The media coverage led to protests calling for Zimmerman's arrest. Eventually, Zimmerman was charged with second-degree murder. But on July 13, 2013, the jury found him not guilty and he was acquitted. Immediately after the acquittal, a decentralized political and social movement known as Black Lives Matter with the hashtag Black Lives Matter was started in social media. This movement gained national and international attention after the killing of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. An estimated 20 million people participated in the Black Lives Matter protests in the US, and the success of the movement was entirely due to social media. In fact, the footage of George Floyd's murder was captured by a bystander and it went viral on Facebook. Though there are ethical questions and concerns about the footage being shared on social media, the success of the Black Lives Matter was undoubtedly the success of social media. Thus, social media has played a role, both positive and negative, in the psyche of societies across the globe. But regulation of social media poses the greatest challenge of all times. This is for the reason that there are quite a few things that distinguishes social media from the mainstream print and electronic media. They are, number one, a process of licensing and registration prescribed statutorily for print and electronic media. Number two, the physical presence of print and electronic media at definite locations. Number three, the availability of the identities of the author, creator, publisher, producer, and distributor of the content in print and electronic media. And number four, the limitation on the ability of the content in print and electronic media to multiply and to travel. Social media, in contrast, enables anonymity, operates without geographical limitations, thereby posing jurisdictional problems, has the ability to travel faster, perhaps, than sound, and the potential to multiply by unimaginable proportions. What was always stored in the darker chambers of a human mind for fear of being found out in the real physical world can now be shared in the social media with anyone without any fear of being caught or put to shame. The social media platforms have only a limited control, and that too post the event, as we have seen in the case of Christchurch shootings. Therefore, the questions that arise in regard to regulation of social media are three. Number one, should we regulate? Number two, how do we regulate? Number three, whom do we regulate? On the first question, as to whether we should regulate at all or not, almost all stakeholders have now reached a conclusion that we should. 2 weeks after the Christchurch shootings, the New Zealand Prime Minister announced, I quote, "We cannot simply sit back and accept that these platforms just exist and that what is said on them is not the responsibility of the place where they are published." I unquote. Within a month of Christchurch shootings, Australia passed a law called as the Sharing of Abhorrent Violent Material Bill, which holds social media companies accountable for the spread of hate content on platforms. With its implementation, companies such as Facebook and YouTube could be subject to huge fines and their executives threatened with jail term if they do not ensure the expeditious removal of inappropriate material. Therefore, there is some amount of consensus among all stakeholders that there should be regulation. But the second and third questions, namely how do we and whom do we regulate, pose greater challenges. This is due to the fact, number one, that the creators of the content in social media remain anonymous many times. Number two, that the originators of the content may live beyond the territorial jurisdiction of the legislating state. Number three, the content originating from a single source may find its way to millions of systems, either legally or illegally. And number four, the tech companies merely provide a platform on which authors, creators, distributors, and sharers post their views or the products of their creation. In the United States, an attempt was made as early as in 1996 to protect service providers from any liability when the Congress passed what is called Communications Decency Act, CDA. This act contained anti-indecency and anti-obscenity provisions. But in Reno versus American Civil Liberties Union, the anti-indecency provisions of this law were struck down as violative of the First Amendment to the US Constitution. Though the purpose of this law was to restrict free speech on the internet, this law contains a provision in section 230, which says that no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. Actually, what led to the enactment of section 230 were two judicial decisions. One in Cubby Incorporation versus CompuServe Incorporation, where the court held the service provider not liable in tort for defamatory content so long as he did not review the content and they merely acted as the distributor and not the publisher. All of you may be aware of the fact that in the law of defamation, a distinction is maintained between the publisher and the distributor. But after 4 years of the decision in Cubby Incorporation, yet another decision was rendered in Stratton Oakmont versus Prodigy Services Company. In this case, the court found that the service provider was using automatic software and guidelines for posting Therefore, the court held that the service provider had made a conscious choice to gain the benefits of editorial control, and hence he fell under the category of a publisher and not a distributor. Therefore, the court held the service provider liable in tort. It is only thereafter that an amendment was introduced to the CDA, Communications Decency Act, by which Section 230 was incorporated. In the first decade of its enactment, Section 230 passed muster. In Zeron versus AOL, the America Online was sued for not acting swiftly in removing a libellous content posted by someone linking the plaintiff's telephone number to Oklahoma City bombing. The plaintiff in that case, had his home telephone number, and that telephone number was published by somebody linking it to Oklahoma City bombing. Therefore, the service provider was sued. Considering that the amount of information communicated via interactive computer services is staggering, the Fourth Circuit Court held in Zeron versus AOL that it would be impossible for service providers to screen each of their millions of postings for possible problems. Faced with potential liability for each message republished by their services, interactive computer service providers might choose to severely restrict the number and type of messages posted. Congress considered the weight of the speech interests implicated and chose to immunize service providers to avoid any such restrictive effect. This is what the Fourth Circuit Court held in Zeron. Though this case was decided in favor of the service provider, after a decade, the courts were flooded with different types of cases where the courts were confronted with complicated situations. Even the moderate advocates of free speech realized over a period of time after Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act that one particular area, namely sexual exploitation of children, reached epidemic proportions online, and the immunity under Section 230 became a center of controversy. While leading sites such as Facebook, MySpace, etc., pulled objectionable content, the traffickers started using dark sites such as Backpage. The victims of sexual exploitation started suing such dark sites, but those sites escaped under cover of Section 230. Therefore, the Congress began an investigation into sites such as Backpage.com, which led to the enactment of what is known as FOSTA and SESTA. FOSTA is the acronym for Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, and the SESTA is the acronym for Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act. Under this law signed by Donald Trump on April 11, 2018, the immunity under Section 230 was removed for services that knowingly facilitate or support sex trafficking. In February 2020, the US Department of Justice held a workshop to discuss ways in which Section 230 could be tweaked. Two categories of proposals emerged. One was to have what is called a carve-out approach, as reflected in the law under FOSTA-SESTA, removing protection for certain categories of content. The other is to have a bargaining chip system that ties liability protection to certain standards, such as the proposed Eliminating Abusive and Rampant Neglect of Interactive Technologies Act. They call it as EARN-IT Act, EARN-IT, Eliminating Abusive and Rampant Neglect of Interactive Technologies Act. Several alternative legislations, such as Platform Accountability and Consumer Transparency Act, limiting Section 230 immunity to Good Samaritans Act, Behavioral Advertising Decisions and Downgrading Services Act, Online Freedom and Viewpoint Diversity Act, Safeguarding Against Fraud, Exploitation, Threats, Extremism and the Consumer Harms Act, SafeTech Act, also came to be examined later. Interestingly, the focus in the United States, which was mostly on state interference with free speech, shifted to private censorship after the Capitol Hill riots that rocked the Capitol complex on January 6, 2021, after the declaration of the results of the election. Holding Donald Trump responsible for the riots, Twitter and Facebook, as well as a few other technology giants, removed Trump's accounts from their platforms and permanently suspended his handles. Social media app called Parler, known to be a supporter of Trump, was removed from Google Play Store itself. This gave rise to a renewed call for having a relook at Section 230 immunity. Unlike the US, Europe, for historical reasons, had to adopt a cautious approach towards free speech. This is on account of the Holocaust. That is why you may find that the United Nations International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, adopted in 1966, contains an article which requires the member states to criminalize the dissemination of ideas based on racial superiority or hatred. Accordingly, many European nations adopted legislations aimed at curbing hate speech. Learning from past experiences, the Council of Europe issued in 1993 a declaration and a plan of action on combating racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and intolerance. A commission set up pursuant to the declaration found a steep increase in the number of racist websites in Germany and the circulation of anti-Semitic material in Netherlands. Therefore, the European Commission wanted the inclusion of suppression of hate speech by way of a protocol in the International Convention on Cybercrime, but this did not materialize due to the opposition from US. On March 22, 2016, Brussels was rocked by 3 bomb explosions, which left 32 persons dead and over 300 injured. Immediately, the European Union Ministers for Justice and Home Affairs issued a joint statement on March 24, 2016. This statement emphasized the need to intensify the work with IT companies, notably in the European Union Internet Forum, to counter terrorist propaganda and to develop a code of conduct against hate speech online. As a result, Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter, and YouTube, which are involved in the European Union Internet Forum, formulated a code of conduct on countering illegal hate speech online on May 31st, 2016. Even while declaring that they take pride in promoting and facilitating freedom of expression, these information technology companies share the commitment of the European Union member states to tackle illegal hate speech. In an act of balancing competing interests, the IT giants set out in the code of conduct several public commitments. Some of these public commitments are: number one, to have in place an effective process to review notifications regarding illegal hate speech on their services so that they can remove or disable access to such content. Number two, to review the notifications for removal of illegal hate speech in less than 24 hours. Number three, to educate and raise awareness with the users about the types of content not permitted under their rules and community guidelines. Number 4, to encourage via partnerships with civil society organizations the provision of notices and the flagging of content that promotes incitement to violence and hateful conduct. But I should tell you that even before the formulation of such a code of conduct for self-regulation, a requirement was already in place in the form of Directive 2000/31/EC. This directive is known as the Directive on Electronic Commerce. It was issued on June 8, 2000 by the European Parliament and Council of Europe, whereby member states were required to take measures to fight against incitement to hatred on grounds of race, sex, religion, and nationality. This directive imposed a limited liability upon intermediary service providers if, upon receipt of actual knowledge or awareness of illegal activities, they did not act expeditiously to remove or disable access to the information concerned. Germany appears to stand apart in this regard as it has a statute. Germany has got a statute called Network Enforcement Act 2017. This act applies to telemedia service providers which, for profit-making purposes, operate internet platforms which are designed to enable users to share any content with other users or to make such content available to the public social networks. Platforms offering journalistic or editorial content, the responsibility for which lies with the service provider itself, do not constitute social networks within the meaning of this act. Under the German law, two sets of obligations are cast upon service providers. They are, number 1, reporting obligation, and number 2, handling of complaints about unlawful content. What is unlawful content depends upon certain provisions of the criminal code in force in Germany. In July 2019, the Federal Office of Justice Germany imposed a fine of 2 million euros on Facebook Ireland Limited for violating its reporting obligations under the Network Enforcement Act. It appears that Russia, Singapore, France, and Philippines have received inspiration from Germany and are working towards a similar law. Coming to the Indian context, freedom of speech and expression in India is made subject to reasonable restrictions that could be imposed by law on grounds such as security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, decency or morality, contempt of court, defamation, incitement to an offense, and sovereignty and integrity of India. As the Law Commission observed in its 267th report, the discussion in the Constituent Assembly on limitations on this freedom of speech and expression centered on whether the proviso to the fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression should cover speech that is likely to promote class hatred. When some members of the Constituent Assembly attempted to argue that the right to free speech is absolute, Dr. Ambedkar refuted it by quoting the decision in Gitlow versus New York, where the US Supreme Court said that the freedom of speech and of the press, which is secured by the Constitution, does not confer an absolute right to speak or publish without responsibility, whatever one may choose, or an unrestricted and unbridled license that gives immunity for every possible use of language and prevent the punishment of those who abuse the freedom. We saw the advent of the Information Technology Act 2000. After the advent of this act, the debate around the free speech got revived in the context of social media. All of you are aware of the fact that Section 66 capital A of the Act made any person liable to be punished with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years and with fine if he sends by means of a computer resource or a communication device any information that is grossly offensive or has menacing character, or any information which he knows to be false, but for the purpose of causing annoyance, inconvenience, danger, obstruction, insult, injury, criminal intimidation, enmity, hatred, or ill will, persistently by making use of a computer resource or a communication device, or any electronic mail message for the purpose of causing annoyance or inconvenience or to deceive or to mislead the addressee or the recipient about the origin of such message. This provision, namely section 66 capital A, was struck down in Shreya Singhal as unconstitutional. While doing so, the Supreme Court pointed out the difference between three fundamental concepts, namely 1, discussion, number 2, advocacy, and number 3, incitement. The court held that mere discussion or advocacy of a particular cause, howsoever unpopular, is at the heart of Article 19(1)(a). It is only when such discussion or advocacy reaches the level of incitement that Article 19(2) kicks in. Subsequently, in Anuradha Bhasin, the Supreme Court recognized that freedom of speech and expression through the medium of internet is an integral part of Article 19(1)(a), and that any restriction of the same must be in accordance with Article 19(2). We must note in this regard that though section 66 capital A was struck down in Shreya Singhal, section 69 capital A and a set of rules known as information technology, procedure and safeguards for blocking of access of information by public rules 2009 were upheld by the court. Section 69 capital A of the IT Act 2000 allows the center to block public access to an intermediary in the interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, defense of India, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, or public order, or for preventing incitement to commission of any cognizable offense relating to the above. While upholding three reasons, while rejecting the challenge, the Supreme Court cited three reasons. The Supreme Court said, unlike section 66A, section 69A is a narrowly drawn provision with several safeguards. First and foremost, blocking can only be resorted to where the central government is satisfied that it is necessary to do so. Secondly, such necessity is relatable only to some of the subjects set out in Article 19(2). Thirdly, reasons have to be recorded in writing in such a blocking order so that they may be assailed in a writ petition under Article 226. As regards the challenge to the blocking rules, the court pointed out that the rules provide for a hearing before the committee set up to see whether or not it is necessary to block such information. It is only when the committee finds that there is such a necessity that a blocking order is made. The court noted that under Rule 8, it is not merely the intermediary who may be heard. If the person, that is the originator, is identified, he is also to be heard before a blocking order is passed. Above all, it is only when an intermediary fails to comply with the directions issued that he is punishable under subsection 3. Shreya Singhal also dealt with the question of validity of section 79(3) of the IT Act, which made unavailable to the intermediaries the exemption under subsection 1. You may be aware of the fact that under subsection 1 of section 79, intermediaries are exempt from any liability for any third-party information, data, or communication link in certain circumstances. But subsection 3 made the exemption unavailable in certain circumstances. The court held that section 79 subsection 3 clause B had to be read down to mean that the words actual knowledge used in that clause should be about a court order asking it to expeditiously remove or disable access to certain material. The court accepted that otherwise it would be very difficult for intermediaries like Google, Facebook, etc. to act when millions of requests are made, and the intermediary is then to judge as to which of such requests are legitimate and which are not. As a consequence, you will be making the internet service provider a judge in a cause which they may not be competent to decide. Recently, the Government of India has issued a set of rules known as Information Technology, Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code Rules 2021 to regulate social media, digital streaming sites, and online news agencies. These new rules require OTT platforms to set up a robust three-tier governance redressal mechanism, including the appointment of a chief compliance officer who shall be responsible for ensuring compliance with the Act and the rules. The intermediaries are also supposed to appoint a nodal contact person for 24/7 coordination with law enforcement agencies. They are supposed to appoint a resident grievance officer who shall perform the functions mentioned under the grievance redressal mechanism. The 2021 rules make it mandatory for platforms such as WhatsApp to aid in identifying the originator of unlawful messages and the likes of Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to take down such messages within a specific time frame. Thus, we see that when it comes to regulating social media, we have three models prevailing in the world, namely, 1, state interference, number 2, self-regulation, and number 3, court intervention. While court intervention is much more reliable, the efficacy of the other two have always been in controversy. Dear friends, we normally quote very often Justice Brandeis, who proclaimed in Whitney versus California that the remedy for falsehood is more speech and not enforced silences. But fortunately, Justice Brandeis did not live to see the age of digital technology and social media, where truth is attacked with more falsehood, and if unsuccessful, the dosage is just increased. Whoever said long before the advent of social media that a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth can even get its boots must be a genius. I think this applies to the present day social media. Dear friends, I have focused very little on the Indian context as we have a few cases pending before courts. Therefore, I thought it would be convenient to discuss the law and the judgments in other jurisdictions where hopefully we will not be the judges or parties to the litigation. With these few words, I take this opportunity to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share a few thoughts with you on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Could we take some questions and interactive sessions, sir?
Yes, so long as they don't concern any case pending here.
That of course, sir. That of course, sir.
Yeah.
So to open up the interactive session, may I request Justice Ramkumar, sir?
Me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Shyam. Anyway, excellent presentation with profuse quotes from abroad and India. When our new media channels are hijacked by Western interests, and what we get is only a garbled or biased version. I think social media has played a pivotal role. But as you rightly said, it is slowly degenerating into anti-social media. Therefore, these social media giants have grown so big that it is impossible for an ordinary man to fight them, even in a court of law, successfully. So mighty are they. Excellent presentation, sir. Thank you.
So regarding these aspects, may I request Justice Nagamuthu sir also to lead the deliberation.
Very good evening to all of you. Oh, I don't have the feeling that I heard your speech. It was a research paper presented before an August audience. And the Honorable Justice Ram Subramanian was referring to the Indian scenario and said that since there are number of cases pending before the Honorable Supreme Court, it may not be appropriate to elaborately cover the Indian scenario. From his speech, by referring to the law and the attempts made in the other jurisdictions, as he narrated here, I'm sure that it is no more a secret as to how the Supreme Court is going to decide very shortly in all the pending matters. So it was really a fantastic lecture. And this time given to him may not be sufficient. And as usual, it is not something unusual for him to give such a wonderful lecture, because I had the benefit of hearing him in many platforms. And I also had the benefit of sitting with him and enjoying his dictation of judgments. And such a wonderful judge. I am really very happy. I have no doubts to raise. I have nothing to ask to him. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is Soumya sir.
No, I think I'll second whatever Justice Nagamuthu said. The less said, the better. Take away the flavor of that wonderful presentation. Anything we add will remove the. It's a wonderful one. Thank you, sir. As always, a great pleasure to hear you.
Thank you.
We're blessed. We're really blessed.
We have a Roshan Dalvi ma'am with us.
It was such an erudite exposition that it doesn't really call for any of the other interactions. But
Yes, ma'am.
as I always felt that all the welfare legislations are abused, if you have noticed in our country. And so is this. So it is really self-regulation, the integrity and the responsibility of journalism that comes to the fore. Otherwise, given that much up, the fundamental right of expression is taken to be the most important of the fundamental rights in America as well as in Europe. It's only that it must be done with care, caution, responsibility, and obligation. And thank you, my lord. It was really a treat to hear you.
I want just one thought. Actually, if it comes to print and electronic media, there are a set of journalists who author the content and they can be groomed into ethics. But here, everybody is a creator. Anybody becomes it's not a journalist. In my opinion, I post it. So, when everybody becomes the creator as well as the audience, it becomes uncontrollable, and the anonymity provides a shield for all of them. That is where the difficulty comes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Justice Karunakaran sir. You'll have to unmute, sir.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes. First of all, Justice Ramasubramaniam, I was your classmate perhaps after 40 years, 42 years. We are meeting. My name is Karunakaran, the former Chief Justice of the Republic of Seychelles.
Okay.
After I finished my studies in the law college, Madras Law College, I migrated to Seychelles and practice.
Oh,
You
great.
remember probably we have to meet at the MUSC, the Palachanda
Correct.
roommate.
Correct.
I'm so happy to see you. That's why I told the professor Mohan that I have to attend because I have to see him after 42 years. You know,
I should share an interesting thought. You know, when I met old college mates, Vivekananda college mates organized a meeting after 40 years. I went inside the hall to find only bald heads and said, no, I was never your classmate. Then they took a mirror and showed me, what are you looking like now? Yes, sir.
Yes, it's a wonderful presentation, Justice.
Thank you.
I'm so happy.
Thank you.
I'm doubly happy because you have given a very informative presentation. I'm not exposed to the American stuff, but anyway, you have done a good research and you have done many things on this issue. But in my view, I look at it always a different way in a judicial approach.
Yes.
Undoubtedly, the social media, in my view, plays a vital role in the administration of justice.
Yes.
In my view, present phenomenon of social media is nothing but a metamorphic new version or breed of the fourth estate, which plays its own critical role in furthering accountability and transparency using its constitutional tool, the freedom of expression. An independent and responsible media shines light on corruption, inefficiency, and abuse of rights and provides invaluable information to the public about the functioning of the essential organs of the state and so on. And also, I believe their right, freedom of expression, is in no way higher than the individual's freedom guaranteed in our constitution.
Makes a call, Jaina.
Okay, Baba.
Yeah, it should be regulated, of course, with all reasonable restrictions which are applicable to, other media. And it is not a license to commit, contempt or infringe upon the rights of others or to breed hate speech or breed communal clash. It would be admirable if the social media, as part of fourth estate, uses its powers for constructive criticism, promoting unity, integrity, and social harmony of our great nation, Bharat, which is just a thought.
Thank you.
After listening to your wonderful presentation, I take this opportunity to congratulate you on all future endeavors in life. It's a great. I don't know how. I don't find words to express. After 42 years, I see you. I remember that face when you used to come to the MUSC with Balajan. You are a product of Vivekananda.
Yes, correct.
So you are all great people.
He is practicing
Thank you.
there in Vrindachalam.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Vrindachalam. Yeah,
Sorry, sir. Please, you'll have to unmute, sir. Sorry. Karnakaran, sir, you'll have to unmute. Sir, you'll have to unmute. Karnakaran, sir.
You're muted.
unmute. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay, right. Anyway, thank you, Justice, once again.
Thank you, Jay.
For your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
We'll meet sometime.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you, sir. Justice Sriram, sir.
A major part of the speech I lost because there was an connectivity issue at my place. So there is one thing which keeps bothering me. There are many matters where you have this Google and other platforms who are made defendants.
Yes.
And the standard defense taken is, we are only a platform. They are posting, we can do nothing. So sometimes I wonder, it's like you are having a marriage hall and somebody conducts a cabaret illegally. So you would allow I am only a marriage hall. They come and dance. How can you take that stand is what bothers me.
No, see, this question has bothered everybody. But then it has bothered also the marriage hall owner. See, what happens is, what happens in no, that's a very good example. Justice Sriram, you came up with a good example. I always used to take the example of a community hall and a hoarding site. You know, in public places, we have hoarding sites.
Yes, sir.
They are taken on lease from the municipal corporations and it is let out to companies where they can place their advertisement hoarding sites. What they put up as advertisement to the hoarding sites and what performances, so for instance, we have, in Bombay, you have the Shanmugananda Hall,
Correct.
which is let out for public performances. Suppose they start the concert with Ganesha Stuti, and thereafter they go to something else. The owner of Shanmugananda Hall will come to know only after the event and not before the event.
Yes, sir.
This is exactly the problem which these online platforms face. Their contention that they are just platforms is also based upon a partial truth that they can come to know of the harmful effect of what is posted only after it is posted. There is no pre-censorship. That's the problem.
You're reminding of what people used to blame about the police after watching a Hindi movie.
Yes.
You know, the crime is over, in the end, the police van comes.
No, it is not the fault of the police. I have a theory, I'll tell you. In all Puranas and Itihasas, God also comes only at the last minute. So we have, after all kinds of sufferings, God comes at the last minute, and the police also come. Our authors have taken clue from what God did.
No, the police said, I can come only after an offense is committed. I can't. But going back to the example, in the case of digital media and the likes of Google,
yes,
I'm sure they will be able to simultaneously or within few seconds or minutes, they should be able to keep a check on what is happening, because things have become so fast today with internet.
Monitoring, yes.
No, they in fact, that is why, even as I said, Christchurch bombings, the Christchurch shootings, they acted very swiftly. But the problem was, the first person to view it, if he downloads the content and he shares it in other platforms, these are not the only platforms available. It has the potential to multiply so fast. Even Corona is not a match.
True.
That is where the problem comes. Of course, they can do a lot. They can do a lot more than what they do now, but it's impossible to stop it completely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Justice Sriram. Justice M.V. Ramanasan. So you let to unmute.
You'll have to unmute.
Ramanasan, you let to unmute.
You have not unmuted.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Too small to speak of a personality like Honorable Justice Ram Subramanian garu. He has been always great and he has been an excellent lecturer, as has been. And I had heard several lectures of Honorable Justice Ram Subramanian garu. Really a pleasure watching him delivering such good lectures. Anyway, Shyam, congratulations on reaching this great milestone of 200 lectures. And also Mr. Prem, I think Prem is here.
Yes,
congratulations to all the organization, including Justice Ram Kumar garu. He has been source of strength, I know, to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Ramana. Justice K. Ramachandran, sir.
Thank you.
And good evening, sir. It's really interesting to hear you on this subject, because I had an occasion to hear you on YouTube when you deliver the memorial lecture on Krishna, yes. On the same, almost the same subject, but in a different context.
Yes.
So that gives an idea as to how you visualize the situation, but you know that there is a danger, but how to protect the danger is a big problem, big challenge for everyone. So as everybody has said, that the because a creator can be one.
Correct.
Because if you have got a lot of creators, then there will not be any control. That is the reason why even our Vedanta says there must be one creator.
One God.
That creator must have only one God.
One God.
Or God, whatever be name you call it, the creator must be one. That creator must be able to have control of everything.
So,
So there must,
Ekameva Advitiyam Brahma, so long as it is there, it is all right. If the if Brahma is many,
you know, because the danger is on the base of what do you call the right of free speech of expression, etc.
Yes.
Will it not going to an extent that is a threatening to the democracy itself? There is one area where we allow to be guarded, because now the cases are pending before the Supreme Court as to whether how far regulation can be possible, etc. Because the whole difficulty is none of these people are within our jurisdiction.
Correct, exactly.
Everybody is foreign jurisdiction. Unless you have got an international law catching all these people as how this will not be regulated, I don't think that even if something is being done, whatever be maybe a criminal act here may not be a criminal act where they are functioning. Those are all the areas where I think that some international interference is required for the purpose of regulating these people. Unless that is being done, we are running into a danger, because now the journalism has become a different going to a different attitude. Instead of saying that giving the true information to the people, paid information makes false information is also coming back nowadays. That is a whole difficult, because paid medias are now working on these areas where we cannot by the time you realize the truth, the damage would have been caused to the person who has been wronged or who have been subjected to such wrong information also. Really, it's a thought-provoking subject. In fact, it has been very, very meticulously and instructively dealt with the lawsuit. Thank you very much for the information given.
Thank you, Justice K. Ramakrishnan, sir. From the academician's point of view, we have a Professor B.T. Call, sir.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, sir. How are you, sir?
I didn't see you.
I received the message from Mr. Sham
Okay.
this morning only,
Oh,
that he's celebrating 200th lecture, and this is being delivered by none other than Justice V. Ramasubramaniam. So I said, it's a very important thing that one, we celebrate the second century. Third is, and the third part is that it is being delivered by Honorable Justice Subramaniam, where we heard you at Chennai,
yes.
almost dealing with a topic almost connected with this topic. And you put a great limitation on what we should ask and what we should not ask. I think most of the important limitation that I find is that you don't want us to ask any question which is sub judice before the Supreme Court.
Correct.
But we can only say
Correct.
that the judgments and the principles that you talked about
Yes.
may not all be, in tune with our needs and requirements. So therefore, what we expect is when this area is dealt with by the Supreme Court, we'll be talking about the law like we talk about Shreya Singhal these days. I think that has become one of the celebrated judgments where the Supreme Court has drawn a very beautiful balance between criminal liability, freedom of speech, and what you said about discussion, and then incitement, and then debating, discussion, and incitement. And I'm sure, keeping in view the difficulties that the nation is facing today, you will find what the difficulties people actually are facing, and those will be reflected in the judgments and the orders that will be given by the Honorable Supreme Court, because we are a very difficult phase. Today, it seems that India has no governance. Today, we see that the whole system is crippling. People are left to themselves and they have no means to fight this COVID-19. I myself, with my family, have just come out of this, and we know what the pains of this disease are, what the sufferings of the people are. And I mean, lucky that we didn't have to go for hospital or outside, but I see that my relations, how they are trying to find just a bed and they are not able to get a bed They're trying to find some oxygen, but they are not getting. I think government has
I started by
to be
saying
more
that.
accountable, has to be made accountable. And if people give the truth about what is the infrastructure, you definitely have to take all those facts into it. Thank you very much, and nice celebrations, my lords. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kal sir. And we have the Advocate General of Andhra Pradesh, Sriram sir. So you let unmute, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. So I just want to ask a question which doesn't embarrass any one of us, and that is whether we as a society have forgotten how to laugh at ourselves, even if for fun.
Yes, we have. that is why there is an inherent advantage of laughing at yourself. Instead of making other people laugh at you, if you laugh at yourself and in the process make others laugh, then you are saved from the embarrassment of somebody laughing at you.
And in the context of what Justice Sriram asked you,
yes,
if it's a post-event regulation that the platforms could speak of and that they were not aware.
Yes.
But don't they have a duty not to be a platform for falsehood? Supposing my GP1, in order to keep his job, says Sriram is the most handsome person in this world. Google can't be peddling this falsehood.
But the problem is, it is a question of perception. Suppose according to your government leader, you are beautiful, and according to your wife, you are not. Which is true and which is false becomes a question.
No, but objectively, nobody could make that comment about me. And therefore, perhaps Google at least should be able to say, Suman can lie, but this can't be this blatant a falsehood. Should that exercise not be possible by a platform?
What is the percentage of allowance that can be given? That is a question which both of us can't answer. Right. Impossible. As I said, the performance. See, take for instance a hall where, in Hyderabad we have what is that hall? In Hyderabad we have that hall where performances used to happen.
Ravindra Bharati.
Ravindra Bharati. Suppose I hire Ravindra Bharati for staging a drama, for putting up a drama show, and in the drama I include scenes which are obscene. Ravindra Bharati manager or whoever is in charge of that will come to know only when it is enacted. He cannot ask you to enact a drama in front of him before. There is no pre-censor. Pre-publication censor is not possible, is it not?
We have a situation where these platforms do not pull down content which has been objected to by people affected or aggrieved by it.
Correct.
But then that is where perhaps they should also be bound by what we call the municipal law. Correct. Which is not perhaps as broad-shouldered as we would say Brandeis would have countenanced or anyone else in American jurisprudence is. But they would not be, and we have been dealing with these situations where the platforms would tell us that this does not seem to be actionable under the regulations we follow, which then makes it a law unto themselves.
See, that is where the difficulty is now allowing them to self-regulate. Allowing them to self-regulate means terms of service provided in fine print, which you and I don't read at all before we sign. Every website into which you go asks you permission to employ cookies. We don't have the time to read they say restricted cookies, limited cookies, or unrestricted cookies. Nobody has the time to read those restrictions and tick those marks before we enter into the site. As a society, we are also careless.
We do not know anything about it.
That's right. Cookies. See, many people have asked me, why are they asking for cookies? They are not providing one along with coffee or tea.
Yes.
They think cookies are eatable.
Without knowing what is being asked and without knowing what we are doing, we simply tick everything.
Correct.
Not only that, when you want the service, you have no other option but to go along with that. That is the whole difficulty.
No. Even in cases where you want a service, they provide you unlimited access in the form of unlimited cookies or restricted cookies. Even that we don't care to. If you go into the websites of some big libraries, they ask you permission to allow limited cookies. We don't see what those limited cookies are.
Yes, we do not know. I don't know till today.
We don't do it. Not a question of knowing. We don't take care because we are running so fast today without any work.
Thank you, sir.
Taking a cue from what Mr. Sriram, the Advocate General, had mentioned, we mentioned about these performances in an auditorium.
Yes.
But there are many times defamatory articles which are published in Twitter or any of these websites.
Yes.
There what happens again, it's like newspaper, you can say the publisher of the newspaper or the editor is responsible for printing that.
Correct.
In a platform, any random person can put
exactly
article.
Exactly.
Correct. So therefore, these platforms to say, but they are making money by giving that platform.
No, in fact, they don't make money by giving that platform. They make money by hosting advertisements in those platforms.
That's what I meant.
Therefore, it is not the person who posts the content from whom they collect money.
Correct.
Somebody told me very interestingly, many of these platforms offer services free of cost. He said, please think, if somebody is offering something free of cost for you, please remember that he is offering you as a product to somebody else.
For selling.
Is there any method to block any website now? If you block one website by means of a judicial order, and another website is started, and all the content is simply transported to that.
Correct. That's right. You and I know what happened in the past. I understand what's the question about.
Yes,
but it is. See, in Devi Bhagavatam, there is a demon called Rakta Bijashpuran or somebody. If he is killed, if he is cut by a sword, from every drop of blood that is shed, another Asura will come up. So the websites, I used to compare them to Rakta Bijashpuran. So if you really block one website, 100 websites will come.
Multiply. They multiply simply.
Only Bhadravali can come and link. Take all
This is the only area where our judicial power goes waste and it cannot be implemented at all.
Therefore, the fundamental law taught to us under the specific relief act that don't pass any judgment which you cannot enforce.
But it happens a lot. It happens nowadays.
Correct.
Sir, as we come to the end of the 200th session, may I request Prem to choose the questions from the chat box which may not, which will pass the test of lispendence or pendency of matters, and also to offer the concluding remarks. Prem, over to you.
Well, I had noted a couple of questions in the chat box, but at the same time, those questions are all already sub judice. So it will not be proper for me to put those questions because they are sub judice. One, of course, even though it relates to a High Court judgment, still it can be appealed to the Supreme Court.
The difficulty is then I will be asked to recuse from those cases. Once
that's the last 3 months.
So, sir, may I be permitted to ask a question which could also be sub judice, but not in that sense?
Yes.
Have the lawyers in Delhi, in good number, who have suffered the internal wounds for being in your court hall and then getting to argue matters and then suffer your smile and the wounds together, not knowing what hit them?
In fact, I am only sorry that I did not have the opportunity to inflict any wound so far. I have not been leading the bench.
You wouldn't know, sir. Sir, you wouldn't know because you would anyway have intended it. The person suffered may not have realized it yet, and he will take some more time to realize it and come back to you.
No, but what is happening is the senior judges with whom I sit, I provide them the clue to fire the salvos and they do it. But sometimes they don't do it with the intonation with which I do it. Therefore, the missiles actually fall before it hits the target.
So I don't know whether I should wish them all the best or yourself, sir.
You should wish them all the best. But then I incorporate them in the judgment.
Oh, yes. Match the following.
Let the missiles don't backfire.
No, these missiles are nothing but humors.
So, Prem, for the proposing the word of thanks, please.
Good evening, all the respected dignitaries and all of you, my dear friends. As a mark of respect, I feel that this erudite lecture needs to be dedicated, or this session needs to be dedicated as a tribute to Justice Mohan Chandragowda and the eminent jurist, former Attorney General of India, Soli Sorabji, both of whom we have lost this week. And both of them, they were unpretentious icons of India's legal system, who were the epitomes of intelligence allied to integrity and grace. Now, for the vote of thanks, I have to say that it is with a very deep sense of honor, privilege, and humility to express on behalf of this platform our profound gratitude to His Lordship Justice Ramasubramanian, the Speaker of the Day, for having taken time of his busy schedule and the cumbersome responsibilities to join us today and to have addressed us on balancing free speech and its restrictions, laying a special emphasis on the social media, taking utmost care not to touch the Indian laws. And sir, I have to tell the participants a famous quote of yours in the 4th Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer Memorial Lecture on almost a same topic on the right of privacy and the new age challenges, that today Google knows more about you than your spouse. Those are wonderful words. And sir, thank you so much for this enlightening, thought-provoking and engaging session, giving us a Vishwarupa darshan of both of you as well as the subject. And unhesitatingly, I have to say that this was an intellectual treat by a judge who adorns the seat of justice in the country's highest court with absolute meaning and majesty instead of mere pomp and pride, who is well known for the sanguine equanimity and the equipoise, and also for delivering several landmark judgments. Thank you so much, sir, for that vivid articulation, captivating each of us all through. And I also thank each and every one of all of you who have been a part of this wonderful platform on this special day when we crossed another milestone, our 200th session. The first 100th session, it was on a daily basis, and then we had to switch on to the weekend mode. And one cannot be blind of the fact that such webinars are generally the result of close cooperation among several individuals. It is my great pleasure and privilege to express on behalf of the organizers and on my personal behalf profound appreciation for the sincere support and encouragement provided by all such individuals, of which I need to specifically take out the names and thank Justice V. Ramkumar, Justice Ramakrishnan, Justice Nagamuthu, Justice Sitaramamurthy, Justice Somayajulu, Justice Kodandaraman, then Justice Abraham Matthew, Dr. B.T. Kaur, then judges like Anandakrishnan Navada, Mr. Ravi, Dr. Vijay Kumar, and M.R. Shashi, who all have actively partook in almost all the discussions regularly. And several legal luminaries have addressed us on diverse legal topics. And I profoundly thank each and every one of all those erudite speakers who have addressed us on this platform. And I need to mention that I wish to be forgiven for not specifically naming each and every speaker while expressing our gratitude. I would also say that all this would have been absolutely impossible without the wholehearted support of all the wonderful participants on our platform. And we recognize with gratitude their substantial involvement and the interactions in the webinars. I once again thank each and every one of you who are no less than a family member for us, for being a source of constant support in our endeavor. And the efforts you had put in, they are really commendable. I also express my sincere thanks to all those distinguished guests who have attended today on our invitation and graced this occasion. I conclude reiterating my gratitude to one and all. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Prem, for that wonderful way of appreciating all those persons who made this wonderful journey very colorful and very empowering. Sir, let us conclude this session by sharing a slide that has been forwarded to us by District Judge A.S. Ravi. He's a special judge TNDPA cases in Coimbatore.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Just 1 second. I just share it. It's much appreciated because he took all the time and trouble to send it to us.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you each and everyone.
It could not be posted. It could not be seen.
Sir, it was not seen.
It was not there.
1 second, sir. I'll just.
Right.
Is it visible, sir?
Yes. Record breaking so yeah. Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So thank you once again for this wonderful session. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sriram. For a moment, I could not. Thank you. Because I was promised.
Justice Sriram, no, he has grown.
Yes.
That's new style.
Sir, that is a very profound statement you have made, sir.
No, that's a pepper and salt and pepper.
No, it's more of salt now. More pepper.
No. See, you have turned what is on your head more of pepper.
You are like Bharatiyar now. Like Bharatiyar.
நாக்குக்கு வந்து மெச்சூரிட்டி தலைக்கு வந்துட்டல இன்னும்
இல்ல you know what, see, I used to say, according to Shastras, God gives you 6 notices before you strikes you down as unconstitutional. First notice is a gray hair. But then human beings give a reply notice to God by dyeing their hair,
coloring
their hair. Then alternatively, God thought he will send a different type of notice to people like Kodandram and me. See, only if something is left, you can dye it. If the something is left, what can you do?
God will ultimately say the limitation period is over.
Expiry date.
No, yes. most of us are living beyond the expiry date. Because we have some more injustice to do. Okay, right. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful session. Thank you.